Before returning to the house, he called the station and ordered all available officers out of uniform to quietly check to see if anyone was watching the house. And if they weren't busy, then keep an eye on the house. After making the call, he returned to the house and asked his husband to follow him to the station, hoping that the killer would return in the evening, see the house dark, and try to enter the territory. At that moment, the 4 burly policemen he knew were assigned to watch this place would pounce on him, using lethal weapons if necessary. Chief Inspector Burns handed over the computer equipment to specialists after receiving several suggestions from the husband about his wife's passwords. Obviously, the computer belonged to her. Hubby was using a laptop that was kept in his office. This news gave Chief Inspector Burns even more hope that they had finally caught their luck in this case. He thought about confiscating his husband's laptop, but experience had taught him not to jump to conclusions. After all, the biggest killer of women was not a disease, but someone they knew, so the husband couldn't be ruled out as a suspect too quickly. However, his gut told him that Brooke was the strangler's latest victim, so he decided that he would check the guy's laptop after the technicians dealt with his wife's computer. Burns made the guy some coffee and asked him a few more questions about Brooke and the state of their marriage. With each question, Burns tried to focus on the man's answers. He kept glancing at his phone, hoping to see a message from the technicians. Although Burns thought it unlikely that the villain was on their sex offender database, he had his husband look through the database. It was also a convenient way to keep the guy away from his home without causing unnecessary alarm. As expected, no one was identified. Hoping that his time at the station had calmed the man, Burns explained that he was free to go but asked him to stay away from the house until further notice. The husband decided to stay at the station for now, saying that he did not want to deal with questions from relatives and friends. Chief Inspector Burns could understand this. So often a person managed to keep himself together until someone asked him if he was okay. For some reason, this phrase and others like it opened the floodgates for many. The husband had just settled into the interrogation room with a fresh cup of coffee when Burns received a message that they had hacked the computer, and the woman's Ashley Madison profile was an open book. Within another 10 minutes, they had an address where the naive wife agreed to meet the man who had been courting her for 6 months. After that, everything went very quickly. Search warrants were obtained. The teams gathered in readiness, and then came the waiting. Every minute seemed like an hour. There was a slight chance that Brooke was still alive, but that chance was diminishing by the minute. 25 minutes later, Chief Inspector Burns decided that they could no longer wait for the judge's order. He authorized the team to break down the door under imminent danger principles. They found a treasure trove of evidence and a very dead wife. There was no doubt that it was Brooke. They had already found her bag, standing on the table in the hallway. She was alone in the house, lying on the bed in the master bedroom, stretched out, her wrists and ankles tied with scarves to the bedposts. Burns thought he would never again be able to look at a lacy black bra or garter belt and find it sexy. The girl had a bandage covering her eyes, and the detective was glad that someone else would take it off. Burns didn't want to see her open, staring eyes, dead eyes. He already had enough previous victims haunting him. Burns couldn't help but feel sad. He wondered if she had any warning, any idea that her illicit encounter would end in death. She was strangled. It was obvious. As with previous victims, the killer used a scarf. This scarf was similar to the ones that secured her wrists and ankles to the bedposts. There were no obvious signs of bruising on her arms, legs, or torso, and she was still wearing her underwear. Burns hoped this meant that the strangler had stuck to his modus operandi and that she had not been raped or tortured. The owner of the house, one Nigel Lawson, was nowhere to be found, despite his car being found in the garage along with Brooke's car. Chief Inspector Burns was amazed at how presumptuously this man had left the victim in his home, in his bed. He clearly thought he had all the time in the world to get rid of the body. Perhaps he considered himself smarter than the forces that were trying to catch him. Suspecting that Lawson had access to a second vehicle and that later that day or evening, he would attempt to break into the woman's home to take over her computer, Detective Chief Inspector Burns radioed to the officers monitoring the victim's home to be on alert. Afraid to do it himself, Burns sent Sergeant Moira O'Connell back to the station to inform her husband. Many times during his career, he had to deliver bad news, face to face with parents, husband, son. He saw that look, pleading eyes, eyes that begged him to say it was a nightmare. Not true. Error. He witnessed immeasurable grief. I saw understanding, awareness in their eyes that their lives had changed forever, that they would never see their loved one alive again. They will never drink coffee together again. They will never laugh at a common joke. He hated witnessing this level of pain. He felt like a bystander, powerless to help. He hated feeling useless. Every time responsibility fell on him, he tried to think of something comforting, but the words did not come. He always returned to time-worn cliches. Burns knew his job was to be part of the wailing sirens and the crime tape. His only help to his loved ones was to find the culprit of their grief. He did this to the best of his ability. Besides, O'Connell was as good a police officer as one could hope to find. When you work with a woman, it says something when you don't notice her appearance, just like you don't notice a guy's appearance. And Moira was a beautiful woman. He knew this from the annual policeman's ball. She was smart and didn't take crap from anyone, but for all her toughness, she knew how to deliver bad news. Burns told himself that she would do a better and kinder job of informing her husband than he would. In addition, men are better at accepting bad news from a woman, as his years in the police force taught him. They had a photograph that the husband had provided earlier, as well as a woman's purse, so they were confident that the victim was Brooke, but the coroner would require 3 forms of identification, so the husband would soon have to attend the identification parade. Burns knew Moira would do a good job of preparing him for this traumatic experience. While he was asking all the usual questions to the crime scene guy, whom Burns didn't know very well since he was a rookie, Moira informed him that the woman's husband had taken the news stoically but poorly, refusing any consultation. He said he needed air and went for a walk, promising to be back within an hour. Senior Inspector Burns coordinated a search of the house for new evidence. It didn't take long for Mr. Lawson to get his computer up and running. Burns could have kissed the young constable who told him this. The case, which had been languishing for lack of leads, was now awash with them. The computer was packaged and immediately delivered for examination. A few minutes after the computer was sent away, another discovery was made in the guest room. 6 identical carry-on suitcases were stored in a built-in closet in the room. Each suitcase contained a collection of computers, tablets, and phones. Lawson made it easier for them to find evidence in the case. The guy clearly kept the computer equipment as trophies. Even better, each suitcase came with a pair of panties, sealed in a Ziploc bag. Burns was confident that the DNA would match that of their victims. Burns began to breathe a little faster, with a hint of rush as he exhaled. Almost laughter. Almost a cry of triumph. A search of police records revealed that Lawson was issued a license to carry a pistol, but no weapon has yet been found. There was also no information regarding his supposed second vehicle. The car rental agencies haven't found anything yet either. A warning was issued that Lawson may be armed and should be considered dangerous. After all, any cornered animal is dangerous. The instinct is always aimed at survival. Chief Inspector Burns assigned additional officers to scour the area around victim number 7's home, since any reason to act covertly had now disappeared. Disappointingly, a second search of Lawson's home yielded no clues as to where the perpetrator worked. No empty suitcases were found either, so Burns sent 2 detectives to check all the stores and department stores that sold items of the same brand as those in the guest room. You never know when you'll get lucky. Lawson may have been purchasing a bag for Brooke's belongings. By 7 p.m., Lawson was still at large. His home was dark. The police had completed their search, and forensics had collected everything they needed. Later, Chief Inspector Burns would reproach himself for not leaving instructions for the second capture group earlier. The gap between the forensic team's departure and their arrival allowed Nigel Lawson to sneak into the house through the back door. Perhaps he was alerted by the damage to the front door. All Chief Inspector Burns knew was that as he entered the back hallway for a final check before leaving the house to the raiding party, he was confronted by Mr. Nigel Lawson holding a pistol pointed at his chest. Burns quickly jumped through the doorway, years of training helping him out. His heart was beating wildly, but his hands were steady. Knowing what this sick bastard had done, these women may have cheated, and as disgusting as it was, they didn't deserve to die for their sins. And knowing how desperate Lawson must be, Chief Inspector Burns missed the usual warnings in the end. After all, there were no witnesses, and again rushed into the hall, crouching, catching Lawson by surprise. Lawson fired in a frenzy, hitting the wall well above Chief Inspector Burns's head. Without hesitation or remorse, Burns returned fire, firing two .38 caliber bullets into the middle of Nigel Lawson's chest. Lawson was dead before he hit the floor. Burns approached the man holding a gun in his hand. He looked down at Lawson's surprised but unseeing eyes. Still looking at Lawson, he called the station. Burns waited for the recently departed employees to return. He couldn't stop looking at Lawson. The guy was ordinary. Handsome, yes, but ordinary. Dressed in a business suit, clean-shaven, fashionable haircut. If you met him on the street or in a club, you would not have guessed the evil lurking in him. Somehow this didn't seem right to Chief Inspector Burns. Evil should be like in cartoons, where the villain is always easily recognizable. It should be written on them. But that was not the case, usually not. Most often, evil was clothed in ordinary colors familiar to the crowd, and sometimes even in beauty. Seductive, alluring. Like a beautiful flower that hides poison in its core. The sound of a siren broke his thoughts. He was glad. He just wanted to go home and hug his wife and children. It turned out that Chief Inspector Burns had found a gold mine in each of the suitcases. They actually contained the victims' computers, and each of them had an Ashley Madison account where they corresponded with Nigel Lawson in different guises, but all with his photographs. DNA from the panties also matched the DNA of the victims. Lawson's computer was another matter. It, like the victims' computers, showed that he had an Ashley Madison account, but, unfortunately, it only contained information about his last victim. They later suggested that he opened a new account for each victim, one for every hunt. The investigation also later established that Lawson was in Melbourne on business at the same time as victim number 3 was killed. The husband of the 7th victim of the Ashley Madison killer, as Nigel Lawson was later dubbed in the press, walked around the corner of the police station, wiping his eyes. He felt exhausted. He found a small park and sat on a bench in the sun, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Brooke was dead, gone. He will never see her smile again. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. He noticed how the sunlight highlighted the fine hairs on the back of them. He straightened up and raised his hands, clenching and unclenching his long fingers, trying to imagine how they were squeezing the scarf wrapped around the thin throat of his cheating wife. He tried to imagine them tightening the scarf until there was no breath left in her. He trembled, and his mouth tasted of bile. The thought made him nauseous. Then he realized that his irresistible desire died with Brooke. The hunter has taken his last victim. He backed away, his chin dropping to his chest. Relief washed over him. It was all over. It's finally over. 5 years earlier, Brooke had cheated on him. With this discovery, he learned something else. Betrayal does not kill like a bullet to the heart or brain, and it should. It felt like death. Even now, he remembered this pain. The feeling of betrayal that pierced to the depths of his soul, the agony, the rage. Yes, rage. It was all-consuming. She deprived him of sleep. She haunted him every waking moment, inexorably, and always questions. Questions that will never be answered, at least not adequately. Why? Why did she betray him like that? He will never know the real reason. He knew that all the reasons she gave him were tainted by lies. How could they not be? Her answers had a specific purpose. She wanted his forgiveness. She wanted to stay married. At that time, against his better judgment, he allowed himself to be persuaded by those around him to take her back. Give her a second chance. His love for her made him weak, vulnerable, and too open to their arguments. Everyone makes mistakes, they said. She loves you, they said. She's devastated that she hurt you, they said. Ask yourself, they urged him, are you better off with her or without her? Deep down, despite the love, he knew that this was not a mistake. She was spoiled. She'll do it again. It will only be a matter of time before the other shoe drops, before what's left of his heart is destroyed. And that's why he kept an eye on her. On two levels, one is obvious and the other is much more subtle. He hated it. This offended him. That wasn't who he was. And yet he did it. For years. As if taking bitter medicine, he watched her every step, every call, every message. Oh, how he hated that this was necessary. Hated her, knowing she couldn't be trusted. That she would betray him again, will hurt him again. A year ago, thinking he was wrong, hoping he was wrong, he made a grand gesture over dinner at a posh restaurant, announcing that he was canceling all the obvious checks he had been doing. She was so happy and showed it to him later in their bedroom, but even then he wondered if she was thinking about him or if she was reliving one of her past illicit attempts. It was just another unanswered question among many years of unanswered questions. However, knowing her and doubting her, he continued a deeper, more covert observation. Unfortunately, his suspicions, doubts, and fears came true, and he learned that old wounds had not healed. And although his mind, trying to maintain sanity, covered them with scar tissue, the wounds themselves remained. Signs that Brooke was considering a new lover became apparent to him too soon after she thought she was safe. Oh, how it hurt. Old wounds became new again. The other shoe dropped. Deja vu at its worst. Something inside him broke, died, and someone was born. Something ugly, evil spirits, someone dark, evil, Hunter. After that, all he could do was monitor the Ashley Madison account she had created and watch the lengthy seduction of his willing and constantly flirting wife by an experienced and patient predator. A rudimentary facial recognition program quickly gave him the name of the predator, a certain Nigel Lawson, and the address after which the real setup began. Finding out where a guy drinks and then befriending him to learn about his business trips and other movements was so easy as to be a no-brainer. Nigel, or the Predator, as he preferred to be called, during one conversation provided him with the defining moment in his setup, a business trip to Melbourne. It's too easy to arrange a trip to coincide with the timing. For a man who was completely untrustworthy, he himself was gullible, or simply stupid, leaving his keys and wallet on the bar while he made his way across the room to chat with another woman. He had plenty of time to take both to the men's room, take an impression of the house keys, and check the address. When the slug started bragging to his new drinking buddy about all the wives he'd seduced and slept with, it took all of his iron self-control not to wait at the bar and strangle the scumbag then and there. But deprived of love, all he has left is self-control. Much of the joy left his life the first time his wife stuck a knife in his back. Before this betrayal, he was a gentle person, soft-spoken. He loved the theater, art, a good book, and other more cultural things in life. Now this joy, this gentleness, has disappeared. The hunter was surprised that his wife did not notice the change in him. After she got caught the first time, she became defensive, and it was only a matter of time before she tried to regain her primacy by cheating again. As boring as it was, he was right. It was as easy as pie. Copy the predator's profile photo and create your own account on Ashley Madison. He used proxies and the like to cover his tracks, making it appear that he was the predator. It's easy if you know how. He, under the guise of Nigel, administered justice for the sake of other devoted husbands. Will they thank him? Most likely not. His justice was a double-edged sword, because it meant they would learn of his wife's treachery. But this was not enough. Nigel Lawson had to pay for his crimes, for his cavalier disregard for the marriage vows of his conquests. The task of luring Lawson out of his own home so that the hunter could kill his own wife was, in the end, simple. Nigel turned out to be as predictable as his victims. All he had to do was create another profile on Ashley Madison, this time as a woman under the name Brandy. 20-something, mixed-race, bored wife looking for a little excitement. Of course, it's completely fictional. A visit to various stock image sites provided plenty of bikini-clad, cafe latte-skinned girls with languid, sultry looks to choose from to pique Nigel's interest. Upon closer examination, it would be possible to discover that they were not all the same person. But the hunter knew from his own experience that people were very good at deceiving themselves when they wanted to. They saw what they wanted to see. They say that love is blind, but he discovered that lust is responsible for the same disease. Having prepared a trap, he simply agreed with Nigel to meet Brandy at a motel an hour away, on the other side of town. The first meeting was supposed to take place at 8 p.m., but a message sent through Ashley Madison around that time and every hour thereafter, sent via the email snooze feature, kept the frustrated ladies' man at the motel until the morning. Hunter watched as he drove from the motel to work. He didn't look happy. The hunter was proud of his tracking abilities, but the person hiding behind the mask is not very good. He knew his wife would eventually succumb to the temptation of Nigel fucking Lawson. This was evident in her words and messages. Her lust in black and white on the screen. She wrote to Lawson things that she had never even hinted at to him, her husband. She never gave him a chance to become what she needed. Each sordid revelation was yet another poisoned dagger in his already broken and rotting heart. He had to kill her, a version of her, over and over again. It was the only thing that helped cope with the pain. Fury. They were also traitors, killers of their husband's love, their trust, just like Brooke. But this had to stop. Brooke. How easy it was, after all, to lure her to Lawson's house. It only took one message. He pretended to be Lawson. "It's now or never," he said. She arrived practically running. She boldly drove into the garage. She came out from behind the wheel, smiling and confident, like a model. But her smile did not last long. Not for long. All she wore over her slutty underwear was a cape and high heels. She came ready for sex. In the end, she turned out to be a cliché. The rage he'd felt when he saw her, eager and anticipating as she turned to face him in Lawson's garage, rushed through him, but he pushed it away. Time has passed. It was all over. He was a free man, free in every way, free from coercion to punish, free to live your life. Now, for the last time, he mentally went through the puzzle pieces he had provided to the police, looking for flaws that could lead them to him. This activity reminded him of the work of an editor, checking and double-checking storylines, chronology, the smallest details. The hunter was good at his job. Helpful. Sergeant Moira O'Connell told him they were keeping an eye on Nigel's house, probably hoping the news would reassure him. He knew from Lawson's boasts, when he was his drinking buddy in the pub, that Nigel had a gun. The hunter could only hope that Lawson would act in accordance with his arrogant macho nature and be shot in a shootout with the police. But, on the other hand, the alternative in the form of his long and unhappy life in prison was also very attractive. The hunter nodded. Any of the options would suit him perfectly. At that moment, Hunter's phone rang, and he leisurely reached into his trouser pocket to take it out. "Hello, Brown Publishing Service, this is David Brown. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one."